Quarantine is an interactive engine-building Eurogame from designer Mark Klassen and Mercury Games.
In Quarantine, players compete to build the most efficient hospital while fending off an epidemic of the Graysles. Each game lasts about an hour and supports from 2 to 4 players.
Each player starts Quarantine with a lobby and 4 starting treatment rooms. Now you can arrange these any which way you'd like, as long as each treatment room is connected to the lobby by a series of open doorways.
Next, 8 kinds of special room tiles are chosen and then placed face up on the table, along with the additional treatment rooms. The action tokens and the bonus tokens are stacked nearby, and then all of the cubes go in the bag and the game begins.
On their turn, a player must draw and place 4 colored patient cubes, and they can take up to 4 actions. This can be done in any order.
The player to the active player's left begins the turn by drawing 4 cubes from the bag and hiding them in their hand. Now, at any point during their turn, the active player can ask for a new patient, and they'll get handed one of these cubes at random. If it's a blue, red, green, or yellow cube, then it's a patient, and it can get placed in any player's wait line, which forms just in front of their lobby.
If the cube is gray, then it's carrying the Graysles disease, and it will quarantine a tile. Now, if you already have a gray cube in your hospital, you have to place this new gray cube in a tile adjacent to that one you've already got. If you don't have one in your hospital already, you can place it anywhere. Now, a tile that it's placed on is quarantined, and a quarantine tile doesn't perform its intended function. If you draw a gray cube in the first round, then that cube is placed back into the stock and you draw a new patient cube.
Now, when 4 tiles meet, they form a nurse's station on their corners. And if somebody adds a Graysel cube to a tile on a nurse's station, then they can immediately take another Graysel from the stock and add it to any other tile in that same station.
The active player's actions are tracked with white action discs. So the active player takes an action and then takes one of those discs and passes it to the next player. There are 8 actions that you can take, and you can take a single action more than once.
Admitting patients lets you move patient cubes from your wait line and into your hospital. Now, you admit them one at a time, and they have to go in order. You also have to place each cube in a treatment room of the matching color, and there's a limit of 1 cube per room.
Curing patients lets you take all the cubes of a single color in your hospital and move them into your supply. Moving a patient lets you take a patient cube that's in your wait line and reposition it in the line.
You can also decontaminate to remove 1 gray disease cube from your hospital and put it in the stock, and you can renovate to reposition any 2 tiles. Now, you can move these tiles around any way you want, but they have to end up legally connected to the lobby through a series of open doorways, and you also can't split up your hospital into multiple pieces.
Special tiles might let you rearrange your patients, or cure or admit them faster, or give you another special ability. If you want to buy a special tile, you have to open a contract on it. So that means that you take the stack of that particular tile, place it in front of you, and you put a bid on it. Now, this bid is any number or combination of colored patient cubes that are drawn from your supply. You place these cubes on top of the stack.
Now, on their turns, every other player can take an action to match your bid exactly in both number and color of cubes and immediately buy one of those tiles. This can either get added to their hospital or it can get set aside for later use.
Now, if there's still a tile left in that contract stack when the turn comes around to you again, then you can purchase one. If there isn't, though, you get your opening bid back and you get a bonus action marker.
You can also buy an additional treatment room on your turn by spending 2 cubes of any color. Finally, you can bank up to 2 unused actions per turn by using your action to buy a bonus action marker that you can then spend in later turns.
The game continues until there are either no tiles left to be bought or no cubes left to be drawn. At this point, everybody gets 1 more turn, but you don't draw any cubes on that turn. Then we score. Everybody gets 1 point for a nurse's station, 1 point for a special treatment tile, and 1 point for every 2 patient cubes that are in your supply. You also get 1 extra point if you don't have anybody left in your wait line. The player with the highest number of points wins the game.
So I'm a really big fan of the mechanics in Quarantine. It's a fairly fast-playing, simple game, but there's a couple touches of real elegance to it that make it a lot more engaging than other games in its genre. The first of these is the special room tiles. On the one hand, they add a lot of replay value because you're never going to get quite the same combination each game, but they also really contribute to the strategy because some of them are going to synergize in really interesting ways and have a very big effect on the strategy and the development of your hospital. So a big part of the challenge of Quarantine is figuring out which rooms you want, how they're going to fit together, and how to prevent your opponents from getting the rooms that they need. The bidding mechanic that actually lets you get the rooms in the first place is also really cool. I find it a little bit more interesting than a traditional auction system because instead of just trying to outbid or underbid other players, you're trying to anticipate what they're going to bid and then planning everything and betting everything on reading everybody's needs right. There's some interesting bluffing involved in that, there's a really interesting psychological component, and it really adds a lot to the game. My only complaint about Quarantine, and it is a minor one, is that the art on the tiles is just a little bit dull. The quality of components in this game is really great, and there's some neat art on both the game box and in the rulebook, but the tiles themselves end up looking a little bit generic, and they suck a little bit of the fun out of what is otherwise a very engaging and rather thematic game.
So another con to Quarantine is it's not really at its strongest with only 2 players. Really, if you want to enjoy this game to its fullest and get the most out of those really interesting mechanics like the bidding mechanic and that kind of thing, then really more than 2 players is what you want. So that can be a negative for some people. Though there are a lot of pros to this game. For a Euro game, Quarantine is really interactive, which is really nice to see. It's also got a lot of different paths to victory, so that you can try a bunch of different strategies. Depending on who you play with, it's going to be a different game. Everything is a legitimate strategy, so when you play it with different people, it can turn out to be a very different kind of game. There's also very little downtime, which is nice. So you're not going to be waiting without doing anything for somebody else to finish their turn. It feels like it moves along quite quickly and you've always got a lot to do, which is a fantastic strength in this game.